Okay, guys, let's get started with the lecture today. So today I want to talk to you about puzzles and explanations. But before we do that, I have a little quiz for you guys. So take out your phone, your computer, whatever you use to connect to the internet, and answer the following question. Okay, so this is not based on the readings. This is just a little exercise that I come back to in a second. I'm going to reveal it in a while during this lecture as well, what the correct answer in this case is and why we actually talk about it. But what I want to do today, I want to talk about puzzles and I want to talk about explanations. So let's get started with puzzles. So a lot of sociologists, especially in analytical sociology, we think that we should start with a puzzle, something that is worth researching, something that a topic, I don't know, a puzzle is not just a general topic, such as the effects of gender on wages. These are important research areas as well, but that's not a puzzle. That's not a puzzle. A puzzle instead is a well-established explanandum for which there is no well-established explanation. So remember, explanandum, that was what we want to explain. Something that we observe that we want to explain. And what we use to explain it, that's what we call explanans. So in a puzzle, we have something that is well established, something that we observe in the world, but we don't have a well-established explanation for it. So, for example, a correlation which defies the explanation of common sense in the prediction of some theory. So puzzles are often like a little odd. They kind of stick out. They're sort of a little hang on. Something is a little weird here. Something is different, and this could be different to our experience, to our common sense, or it could be in stark contrast with a theory that we thought describes the thing. Right? So we have, let's say, a well-established theory about crime or about health-related issues, or I don't know, or there are theories. I come back to the example on why people commit suicide, for example, or how that works in the societal context in a way. But then there are certain examples, certain countries that completely defy a well-established pattern, that kind of really stick out. Sometimes things just stick out for coincidence. Sometimes there's just randomness in it. But sometimes when, let's say, something sticks out permanently, something is really, there must be something else going on here. We cannot just explain things with randomness. So the best puzzles are the ones which seem to be a little strange and outlandish at first, but once you study them closely, they really put your theories to the test and reveal something that we did not know before, something that is unexpected. So, and the more you keep in mind, when you kind of, what I said the last time, when we have a theory is nothing else than our best idea so far. That's really what it is, right? So what we should try to do, we should try and test these theories all along, because by doing that, we actually can strengthen our belief in that theory, because we tested it in something else. We tested it in something, and hey, so what? Actually, it's still in line with our expectations. But when we kind of find these cases where something is really odd, these are kind of often kind of lead us to where we gain knowledge by actually being able to reject something. Keep in mind, we don't gain knowledge by showing something is true. We actually only gain knowledge by showing that something is not true. Because we can actually never show that something is true. I thought it was really weird that, and you might still think, okay, tell me how it is, but I can't, because this is not how this works. The way this works, we have our best possible idea about the world, and then we go about and try to refute this idea. And this is sort of how we go and generate knowledge. So puzzles are sort of, something is a little odd. You look at it and something is a little out of place. This could be something doesn't fit, something is a little weird, something defies your expectations, and so on. And puzzles can be theoretical, so something that in the literature just doesn't add up. You read something, and this actually are the moments where you should be super excited when you read something in the literature and it just doesn't seem to be right, or something is contradicting with each other in a way. These are the moments that are really exciting, because that means you stumbled across a puzzle. But a puzzle can also be empirical. Some observation just doesn't make sense with our current understanding of the world. And now I have a couple of examples. So one example, I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, suicide is an issue, and sociologists look at it. Obviously, other disciplines look at it as well, but from a societal point of view, it's a very odd thing. When you look at committed suicide, it's actually much higher amongst males than amongst females. So while actually the attempts it's the reverse. So more females do tend to have attempts of committing suicide, but males are more successful in it. So they often use more lethal methods. And you find that all over the world. That shows you actually there's something there. There's something about a gender component here that is related to it. Because all over the world, we find that men are much more likely to commit suicide than women. Or they're much more likely to be successful in committing suicide than women. Except in China. China is a huge odd man out here. So something is really going on, right? So what is the thing? I don't know what is going on. People study these kind of things, but that's a puzzle, you see? This is now an empirical puzzle, where we kind of see something that kind of defies our expectations based on what we observe everywhere else. And actually it's consistent. So it's not just a fluke with, some randomness in some point of data collection, but it's actually there all the time. Okay, another puzzle, which is a little odd. Why are there so many Islamic terrorists with degrees in engineering and so few with degrees in Islamic studies? When you actually look at who are Islamic terrorists, known Islamic terrorists, there's research around them and so on. Actually, you would think, after all, they're kind of in their, in a holy war, but only few of them actually studied Islamic studies. Actually, a lot of them studied engineering. Why is that the case? I don't know. Actually, there's a book. It's called The Engineers of Jihad by Diego Gambetta, who also gave that definition of the puzzle before. Actually, Diego, I was lucky enough to experience him several times. He's like this well-established guy. And he was like a guy who just always flipped things around in a way. He had a talent for it, which is fascinating to observe. So let's say you sit somewhere and somebody tells you something, and he asks a question that completely flips the thing around, completely looks at it from another side. And by doing that, actually that's a strategy to reveal new knowledge. That's a strategy to reveal something new, right? Just to ask yourself not the obvious questions, but something that is a little odd. Or another phenomenon, which is really odd, actually it's known in the literature, you can look it up, I think it's called the Flynn effect. Psychologists deal with it. Why do average IQ scores increase by 3 points every 10 years? So every 10 years, the scales for the tests for IQ tests, they need to be adjusted in such a way that scores need to be lowered, because people just become more intelligent. That's sort of what these tests show. If you would, let's say, if you would take a modern day IQ test and we take out all the questions about, technology or whatnot that people would not have known 100 years ago, or just go to your grandparents and you would give them this test, you would have given them that test at your age and so on. The average would have been like 30% lower across the whole population. That's a big difference, and that's something. Why is that odd? Because we cannot explain this with biological explanations anymore. It's just not feasible. We don't evolve that quickly. So something else is going on here. As I said, people study that, and then, reasonable explanations are, nowadays people get access to knowledge much more than before. 100 years ago, there was nothing like the internet to just quickly look something up. People didn't have the mobile phones when they had questions or whatnot. So there are feasible explanations out there. But it is actually quite stunning that every 10 years the IQ tests need to be changed, such in a way that the points that people get is adjusted. Which also tells you, if you're just before or after that cutoff point, it might really matter for how you score at the end of the day. Or another one of my favorites, is, does anybody know how many Olympic medals did India win during the last Summer Olympics in Rio? Come. Come on, we have a few guys from India. Give me a guess. Do you remember any? 0, 7?
Yeah, very few.
Actually, I looked it up. It was 1 silver medal and 1 bronze medal. Yeah? That's one India won. How many medals did Ireland win during the 2016 Summer Olympics? Somebody? 2? 2 silver. Yeah, it was actually 2 silver medals. What is the population of Ireland? Huh? Around 4.5 million, something like that. What is the population of India? It's 1.3 billion, 1.2 something. Yeah? What is the difference between that? Oh, I don't know, what's the factor of that? There's around 300 times more people in India than in Ireland. But India just got actually fewer medals at the Olympics, or the same amount, but actually just a silver and a bronze, while Ireland, with like a fraction of the population of Irish people, who could potentially go to the Olympics and win a medal and so on, won more medals at the Olympics. That's a puzzle. You see, that's kind of one of the things that is a little odd. Yeah? Hang on a moment, what's going on here? And then your brain needs to actually start working. Right? So now you need to start thinking, okay, what could possibly explain this puzzle, right? I know, somebody has some ideas? Yeah?
Maybe people, due to inequality and stuff, some living will not get a chance to experience recreational sport as much.
Okay, so that's an argument about socioeconomic factors, for example, that, I don't know, maybe in India you have other problems than going to Olympics. So maybe there the argument is going to the Olympics is a bit of a luxury thing. I don't know, maybe for most sports, actually you could argue like that, makes sense. For most sports, you don't make that much money in it. Let's say to be a world-class archer, you're not going to win a TV contract for that, right? Or be, I don't know, unless you're, let's say, a 100-meter sprinter, you might actually get a deal with Nike if you're really good, if you get into, I don't know, the Olympics final and things like that. But for most of the sports at the Olympics, they are a bit fringe. They're not that commercialized. There's not maybe that much money in it. So then the argument goes, well, in countries where people, let's say, where we have inequality, because that's another point, because it doesn't mean that everybody is poor in India. Actually, there's a huge amount of inequality there. And actually, if you look at the numbers of wealthy people, probably it's still much more than people that live in Ireland, right? I don't know. We're talking about 1.2 billion people. Even just a tiny fraction of those who could potentially afford. So that sort of would be a way of, okay, that's a good argument, but to be honest, I don't buy it. Yeah? At the end of the day, because you could argue like that, right? What are other arguments? Sorry?
The government usually pays for the Olympics.
Government pays for things, I don't know, but that starts with, let's say, support, right? I don't know, that starts with building Olympic-sized swimming pool somewhere. It starts with, I don't know, building other facilities for all sorts of sports. And actually nowadays, this is used in a very strategic way. It's always crazy. Actually, the National Olympic Committees, they really identify areas where they think they could be good. And a couple of years ago, I don't know, the UK decided they should be good in cycling. And then they kind of invested a lot of money into cycling. And then you have these weird things. For decades, I don't know, let's say luge or bobsleigh was dominated by some weird Germans, I don't know. Or then you have some weird ski jumping things. And I don't know, or another favorite of mine is speed skating. The Dutch are just really good in that, for whatever reason. Well, I could find an argument, again, maybe there's a lot of canals. I don't know, what are they going to do during the winter? Maybe it freezes, maybe they do that naturally in a way. But there's a lot of funding in there as well. So I don't know, that could be a good point. Yeah? So how could you go about that? Well, actually go and kind of compare the fundings, maybe get data for that. See about what do countries actually invest in certain things. Or another thing, I don't know, another argument? Yeah?
Could it be a cultural argument?
Cultural.
They focus on cricket as a sport.
Okay, there you go. If you're, I don't know, if you're from India, if you've ever been in India, I don't know, cricket is huge. I don't know, this is massive. So probably a lot of energy goes into other sort of sports that are not in the Olympics, right? So people, I don't know, are sporty, I don't know, in different countries, more or less, but there's sort of the energy, it's directed somewhere else. Right? So that's a valid argument. Yeah? So actually there are all sorts of arguments out there. I don't really know what it is. Sometimes it's not just one argument. Yeah? But that's sort of where your sociological brain needs to start working. And then you kind of try to think about, okay, how could I now exclude some of these explanations? Yeah? Remember, you can never prove that something is true, but what you can do is actually you can knock some of these alternatives out. That's sort of like the strategy, how we go about that. Another odd one. Yeah? Why is the highest rate of plastic surgeries in the world found in South Korea? Actually, it's really high. It's really high. I think I read somewhere that 1 in 3 women in the age between, 18 and 35 has plastic surgery. That's crazy. It's a huge amount. It's like really high when you look at the rate, right? So I don't know, now we're talking about the number of plastic surgeries that happen compared to the number of people that live somewhere. But again, it's sticking out. Like what is going on here? You see, something is a little different. And these are entry points for good sociological thinking because they allow you to leverage that difference, right? Okay, another one, which is a favorite of mine, is the books that are most stolen from the Bodleian Library in Oxford, the University of Oxford Library, are actually theology books. That's odd. Yeah? That was Shalt Not Steal, I don't know, whatever it is. Yeah? Apparently it doesn't really work. Yeah? You could say maybe there are just more books of them. I don't know. Again, it's like a puzzle, right? You see something doesn't really add up. Something is a little odd. So how do we go and find these puzzles? And as a good sociologist, you just really need to experience the world around you, right? So you really need to be aware of what's going on. And once you kind of get into that thinking a little bit, you kind of start seeing these puzzles. You kind of then really see when something doesn't really add up. When something is a little off. You could also read about them in the news. The news is a great source for puzzles. I always skim the news and check for these kind of things that are just really, really odd. Because I think they are fascinating sociological puzzles then to kind of start researching on. Or you could find them in the literature. So if you've done the reading for today, Jon Elster, he actually talks about a couple of these puzzles that I just presented to you. You can comment it in the lectures, there you hear about puzzles. But most importantly, I think, is really just to open your eyes. Just really experience the world around you in a way and kind of start questioning, sometimes look at things from another perspective in a way. Because the thing is, we are often kind of trained to go our lives in a certain way, and that's sort of how we experience things, is what we expect things. I talked a little bit about peripheral vision the last time. In a way, that's just how we live our social life as well. So we don't really experience the things around us that seem to be a little odd. So as a good sociologist, I always say, number one thing you need to do is open your eyes. Okay, but now let's say we have something like that. We have found one of those puzzles that we care about, and at the very beginning I ask you something about the crime rate. I come back to that now. The first question is it really a puzzle? Is it really a puzzle, or is this just a weird thing, how something was calculated in a way, or is there something going on, right? So, I asked you about which country has the highest crime rate. Actually, most of you guys had that correct. The highest crime rate is found in the Vatican City. There was another very interesting effect because we had probably first mover effects, and there's a whole other thing that we're going to talk about later during this lecture about the first people kind of saying something and other people see what I was saying. So there's a lot of studies around that as well. But the Vatican has the highest crime rate in the world. Well, why does the Vatican have the highest crime rate of all countries in the world? Well, say the Vatican, headquarters of the Roman Catholic Church. Actually, the state of the Vatican is actually not that old. I read about it this morning. It was just officially became a state in 1929 when it was signed. A treaty, that now is being recognized as a state. Apparently, it's also the only state that is on the UNESCO World Heritage List as a state as a whole. Now, it's a tiny little place. If you ever been there, I don't know, probably you visited when you've been in Rome. If you haven't been there, Rome's a great place to be. It's one of my favorite cities of all time. There's so much to see in all sorts of areas. And some old data that I have, probably, I don't know, it's outdated, but this is data from 2002. The Vatican officially had 455 people being a population there. So there were 455 people with Vatican citizenship. Actually, getting Vatican citizenship is very difficult. It's not only you need to be No, I don't know. It's not about being born there. Actually, it's when you work there. And as soon as you don't work there anymore, you actually also lose the citizenship. If you don't have another one, by default, you become Italian afterwards. So who are those people? Well, it's people that work in the Vatican. It's still run as a country. There are administrators, there are all sorts of things. There's a government going on. There are cardinals, and obviously the Pope, I don't know, some other folks that live and work there. So this is the population that we have in the Vatican. Again, it's like older data from 2013. And during that year, there were around 400 civil offenses and 600 penal offenses inside the territory of the Vatican. And when we look a little closer to it, it was mostly pickpocketing and shoplifting. So there's a lot of that going on. Funny story, does anybody know? Well, obviously there are lots of people there, but anybody could think of another reason why there's a lot of pickpocketing going on there? Tourists, okay. Beyond that? The argument is there are lots of people. I don't know, it makes sense. I don't know, if you kind of want to steal something, go to where lots of people are. You can disappear, I don't know, it's harder maybe to find you. So, another reason.
I don't know how does the Vatican law exist differently, or is it the same as the rest of it?
Actually, that's correct. There's a difference in the juridical system. So actually, they don't even have a jail. They don't have a jail. So actually what happens is nobody gets sent to jail when you commit a crime there, because they don't know what to do. Right? So they don't have one. They have like a little room somewhere where they store some other things so that they could potentially turn into a jail. But the judicial system is different. You know, there's like not a court. Well, there is a court, but I don't know. It doesn't run as smoothly, as efficiently as in other countries, because I don't know. They only have 400 people, or 500 people there to begin with, in a way. So that's a different thing. But maybe you see where I'm going with this. So we have like just about 450 people living there, but we have a lot of offenses happening there on that territory. And I mean, I look at how crime rate is calculated. It's the number of crimes that happen in a country divided by the number of people that live in that country. Yeah. And there you go. So this kind of brings us a really high crime rate, which is the explanation for this oddity. So, yeah, just in comparison, I looked it up. I don't know which data that was, but in Ireland it's about 5.3%. Obviously, there are much more people living here. It's a different story. So, if you would just look at the numbers, we would think, okay, this is really an outlier, but actually this was a very easy one to show you guys. There was not really, we didn't really have to come up with a substantive explanation here. You know, this is about, I don't know, how the numbers are being calculated in a way. And so I wouldn't really consider this like a good puzzle, because it really is just about how we calculate certain things. Okay. So now let's assume we have our puzzle. So we established something that is well established. It's not just a fluke. It's not just how we calculate things and we find it. And it's kind of odd. It's kind of sticking out in a way. So how do we now go and explain this? And how do we make an explanation? And you know, you might think this is straightforward, but actually it's a little more complicated than you might have thought. So on the one side, we have what we want to explain. We call that the explanandum. On the other side, we have what we want to use to explain it. We call that the explanans. Yeah? And in between, we have something that is called the mechanism. So how do we get from the one to the other? And as we just talked about, are certain things, let's say in the case of India with the gold medals or with the Olympic medals and so on, actually usually there is more than one good explanation for something. Yeah? There is more than one possible routes why the one thing could have led to the other. And this is sort of where your thinking needs to start. Actually, in the whole science, this is how it works. There's always alternative explanations, and then we try to refute those alternative explanations. And at the end, the one that we have left, that we have not refuted yet, yeah, or that we tried to refute, but we couldn't refute it, that's our best guess. That's sort of what we say is the current incumbent theory about how something came about or what explains something. That's sort of how it goes. And that's sort of like a different kind of thing. So now I'm going to use another puzzle, a puzzle that was brought up by Jon Elster. And here's this guy, you know, he's like a guy who was a professor at Columbia University. He's also in Norway. He's a Norwegian guy, but quite impressive. And he wrote a couple of very interesting books, like explaining social behavior or nuts and bolts. I don't know. There's some references in there on Brightspace for that. But he found this puzzle. He lives in New York, Columbia University in New York, and he goes to these Broadway shows, and he's been doing that for many years. And he observes, hang on a moment, it seems to be that more people stand up at the end of the show than they used to 10, 20 years ago. So this is where he starts with the observation. Now, the first thing you would have to do is actually go, is that actually true? I don't know, find some evidence for it, establish that we want to explain. But let's assume this is a puzzle, actually. It is a puzzle. What are possible explanations for it? So now what I want you to do, I want you to take 2 minutes and discuss with your neighbor at least 2 possible explanations for this puzzle. Why do more Broadway shows receive standing ovations than 20 years ago? And I also want you quickly think about a strategy about how you could find out which one it actually is. Yeah, okay, so 2 minutes. Okay, let's interrupt here. Anybody had some ideas? What is the outcome? What did you think about? Yeah, give me an explanation.
Well, basically, I mean, at least from what it says from the readings, the reason why there are more standing ovation nowadays, standing ovation is because prices have gone up. So according to a theory, which is, what was the name of the theory?
It's called cognitive dissonance, yeah.
Yeah, basically, in order to compensate, like let's say you spend a lot of money,
yeah.
So you think maybe you have to think that the money is well spent. So basically, you have to convince yourself that the show is good.
Okay, we come back to that in a second. Folks came up with another explanation. This is sort of the kind of things that is your bread and butter. As a sociologist, I need to give you any puzzle, right? You need to come up with another explanation.
Quality could just be better because the prices went up, so more standing ovations.
Quality is better. So it sounds you've done the reading. Somebody else, yeah, with another explanation. There's a good explanation. Yeah. Another explanation. You need to come up with it. Make that an exercise. I don't know, you observe something in the world, come up with 3 potential explanations for it straight away. Wherever you observe something, just think about it. Get your brain into thinking about alternatives. Yeah. Another explanation. Somebody up there. Yeah?
I would say cultural explanation,
Cultural, yeah?
Yeah, because of people get used to stand up at the end of the play, so they just do it because of they're used to it.
Okay, it's actually not a bad explanation as well. Maybe there's cultural norm changes around something, right? and that kind of people go to. How could we go and see that? Well, actually, that would then only work if people actually know that, right? So they need to know about that norm. So probably it would be more likely when somebody actually then goes to a show twice. Because if your argument is true, it's about cultural norm, and I'm going to a Broadway show for the very first time, I don't know that people stand up. I don't know that you're supposed to stand up. Why would I stand up then? Maybe I see it from others in a way. Yeah, another explanation?
There was, I think in the reading, it was talking about how in the past there would have been a very specific kind of people would go to Broadway shows,
Yeah.
whereas now there's more of a
Okay, it's about a change in the audience, that's true, that's also in the reading. But you see how we go about that. So you have a puzzle, you see something, and you think about, I don't know, what is sort of like my best possible explanation? Yeah, you really think that through. So like, okay, what is sort of like, what makes the most sense? What is maybe most in line with theory or whatnot? We get to that in a second. You think about your best possible explanation. But then you also find sort of all sorts of other alternatives, right? I don't know, you go about that, you read about that, you observe the world or whatnot for different kind of, what is your best possible explanation. But then you also think about the alternative. What else could have driven it? And that's sort of how you need to think. You always need to think, okay, well, it's out, but so if ever somebody tells you this is how it is, whenever you read something like a paper or a theory and they say this is how it is, you need to immediately start thinking, okay, hang on, what else could have produced that outcome? Huh? That's sort of how you need to think about it. And then you need to think about, I don't know, methodological things, but also the substantive things, substantive alternatives for that. And then you go about to knock these alternatives out. That's what you do. One after the other, you try it. And then the ones that kind of keep standing, these are sort of like your best explanations. And then we kind of believe more in that because we showed that it wasn't something else. So it's like a really weird thing. It's like the bending, I don't know, Richard Feynman once said that science is the bending backward. I don't know, I don't get it back. I don't get it. But we really flip around in a way. And we don't show if something is true, but we can only show when something is not true. And this is our whole strategy, thinking alternatives and kind of knocking these alternatives out. So, for example, some folks said it's about higher ticket prices, that was something in the readings. Another explanation could be, I don't know, here the explanation goes, higher ticket prices went up, and if that is the case, it leads to more standing ovations. Then we would immediately have to start thinking, okay, wow, for shows where where there was no increase in the prices, you would have fewer standing ovations. If it is related to the money that people pay for that, and there's like an explanation, a theory around that. Or alternatively, it would be, let's say, if companies give away tickets for shows for free, people didn't really pay for that show, right? Then you would say, okay, well, then there should be fewer standing ovations as well. If it is this mechanism going on that is related to ticket prices. So, and if we do find these other things, right, this sort of actually gives support for the main explanation that we had. And then we have like the one last standing, and this sort of like how we come about our explanation. But we can do the whole thing a little more systematically. And this is what I want to do with you now. And this was actually in this reading, explaining social behavior, more nuts and bolts for the social sciences. John Elster, as I mentioned, is like a sociology professor, actually also sociology and politics. He used to be at Columbia, probably the guy is retired right now. So he kind of outlines this strategy. This is like what we call this hypothetical deductivo model. Great exam question, like, I don't know, outline that, describe it, an example, blah, blah, blah. So it starts off, choose the theory that holds out the greatest promise of a successful explanation. Now, this is like the first step that we go about that. And as we heard, it was mentioned, it might be really to increase ticket prices. What is the rationale here? The rationale here is, let's say, okay, if you kind of pay a lot of money for something, it hurts you. You feel bad about it because you have to spend a lot of money to it. So what is a way of kind of solving that problem, that you kind of just spend a lot of money? Let's say you go to a concert, and nowadays, God, you spend hundreds of euros on music concerts. Well, supposedly because that's sort of how musicians make money nowadays. They don't make money with selling CDs anymore. That's just gone. So they make money with music concerts. So you go to a concert and you spend like 250, 300 euros to see, I don't know, somebody in the 3 Arena. A lot of money. One way to deal with this is to tell yourself it was the best music concert ever. It was totally worth it. A great experience, great fun. I don't know, music was fantastic, best live act ever, right? So this is like one way of kind of resolving that issue that you have with having spent a lot of money on something. And that's actually the explanation that Elster champions. So he says, I shall consider an explanation in terms of rising prices of Broadway tickets. One newspaper report says, the reporters, the playwright Arthur Miller as saying, I guess the audience just feels having paid $75 to sit down. God, that was like back in the days. It's cheap. It's their time to stand up. I don't mean to be a cynic, but it probably all changed when the price went up. When people have to pay $75 or more for a seat, many cannot admit to themselves that the show was poor or mediocre and that they have wasted their money. To confront to themselves that they had a good time, they applaud wildly. It's a bit like you thinking that UCD is the best university you could have possibly chosen because you spend a lot of money on it. Right? So you come here, you kind of spend thousands of euros. When you're an international student, you pay actually even more. It's a crazy amount of money that you pay for it. So what do? You kind of tell yourself, oh, it's such a great environment. You know, the academics are so great. They teach you so many good things. They teach you all these theories about what you can learn. Actually, they even tell you about why you kind of make yourself feel better in a certain way. So that's actually an explanation that Elster champions, and as we'll see later on, actually this is not just something that he applies. He uses that in this particular setting. You know, he kind of outlines the mechanism here. This is sort of what he outlines as a mechanism of what is going on here. And then he says, okay, let's then, the next step, specify a hypothesis that applies this theory to the puzzle in the sense that the explanandum follows logically from the hypothesis. So he says, now we create a hypothesis based on that. You see, this was like a process that I outlined. About a story about, I don't know, how I might feel bad when I spend a lot of money and so on. If you kind of put that into that language of what we want to explain, that means we want to explain more standing ovations on the one side, the explanandum, and on the other side, we have increased ticket prices. And then we have like a mechanism that links the two things together that I outlined. It's like, I don't know, I spend a lot of money, I want to feel better about it, I tell myself the show is great. So that's sort of his best possible explanation. But now let's go back to, actually, there could be lots of other explanations for that. You know? And now in the third step, it says, identify or imagine plausible accounts that might provide alternative explanations. Also in the sense that the explanandum follows logically from each of them. So there could be another explanation that also leads from A to B, that also leads from, I don't know, that also explains why there are higher ticket prices. And one argument that he puts forth, that some of you guys mentioned, is that it is about the audience. That the audience changed. Actually, he mentions that folks from New Jersey now come into New York. You know, I don't know, they drive in. It's sort of like it's not like the elite that goes to the Broadway shows anymore, but instead, he argues, it's like a different kind of folks. Now, if you watch the Jersey Shore, you know what I'm talking about. It's crazily addictive, these kind of things, you know. But here the argument is, okay, the audience changed, and the audience is easier to impress. They are, in the Broadway show, there are more standing ovations. Yeah.
You could link that to Broadway becoming more touristy.
Yeah.
People go to New York, they go to Broadway because, I don't know, it's a touristy thing.
And that's a totally feasible explanation. You know, it makes sense. If you go there, I don't know, probably it is mostly tourists that go there. Actually, another explanation you see like similar shows popping up in other tourist destinations. I don't know, you have tons of shows like that in Las Vegas nowadays if you go there. Now, it's kind of crazy, you know, so it's probably a different kind of people. So it's not a stupid explanation, it's actually a good explanation. It's a good explanation. Another explanation, some of you guys mentioned that as well, maybe the quality of those shows just changed. Yeah? So maybe the reason why there are more people standing up at the end of a Broadway show is that those shows just got better. Perfectly reasonable explanation, makes sense. Yeah? It could be true that over 20 years, I don't know, the shows just got better. But that's sort of like now alternative explanations that we have. And you see now the next step, and that's sort of what Elster outlines here in this strategy, in this hypothetical deductivo model is, okay, now for each of these rival accounts, for each one of these alternatives, we now need to think about something. We need to refute it by pointing to additional testable implications that are in fact not observed. So now the way we go about it is we think, okay, what if it would be about the audience being changed? What if it would be about the quality being different of the shows? What else would have to be true then? And you see that is different from the ticket prices going up being the explanation. Right? And this is what Elster calls support from the side. Yeah? So support from the side is kind of thinking about the alternatives and kind of seeing what else would have to be true if the alternative would be true. Now, that's like your thought experiment. So we have our main explanation, then we think of an alternative, And now we think, okay, what if this alternative would be true? What else would have to be true? So if it is about different audiences leading to more standing ovations, there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. Keep in mind, this is our alternative that we have here. But then if the show actually goes onto the road, and let's say the show is somewhere in the middle of the Midwest and the US, somewhere in the middle of no man's land, actually then there should be more standing ovations than in the city as well. If it is about the different audience, and you think it is about a city life where there's rural, population and so on, you would observe that. What is another one, more clever way? And maybe now you see about how, and these are the kind of things, if you're a good sociologist, you start exploiting these kind of things. So if that actually would be true, well, then on days where the bridge, from New Jersey to New York was blocked because of snow or whatnot, or traffic or accidents or whatnot, and you know that people could not have gotten from New Jersey to watch the Broadway show in Manhattan, then on those days there should be fewer standing ovations. You see how that how that reasoning goes? So if the alternative would be true, if it is about the audience that kind of changes, what else would have to be true then that I can plausibly test? Testable hypothesis. And these are testable hypotheses. So I can go and check how many standing ovations are there when the same show goes on tour. Right? Or how many standing ovations are there when something like the traffic is blocked or whatnot. You see, and this is sort of where you become very creative in kind of finding these situations where the one thing is true, but then the other thing cannot be true. So if you don't find these things, if you don't find a difference in standing ovations in the countryside and in the cities, or if you don't find a difference on, where we know that people could not have gotten to the city, well, that kind of means that it's not a good argument for our different audience explanation. Because if it is about, you see, there's a general thing, like audience is different in a way. If that would be the case, then these other two things would also be true. And if you can refute those two things, then actually it lends support for refuting the alternative explanation to begin with. So we could actually knock that out. That's how we would do it. So we think about the alternative, we think about what else would have to be true if the alternative is true. Think about this quality argument that we had before. So again, perfectly reasonable argument. It is about improved quality over the years. And because of that, standing ovations went up. Well, if that would be the case, something else would have to be true. You see, and now I'm actually changing the thing, the explanandum, right? If this is sort of or that I'm looking at, if it is about, if quality really improved over the last 20 years, during the time where we see the increase in standing ovations, you would probably also find better reviews. And you could look, magazines, journals, online reviews, rankings, whatnot. You would actually have to find that if the shows objectively got better. Or another argument would be, well, if the shows really got better, probably they would run for longer. If a show is not good, it gets cut down. Nobody wants to go there anyway. But if the show is really good, the quality is better, maybe the runtime of those shows got longer. And now we apply the same logic. So if we kind of don't find evidence for these other two things that would have to be true, if the alternative is true, that means we have, it kind of, it raises doubt on this alternative explanation here. So it would be really odd if we don't find these other two things, and it would still be the improved quality of the shows that led to more standing ovations. So again, that means by showing that the other things are not true, that would have to be implied by the alternative explanations, we can then kind of start refuting alternative explanations. So again, we could kind of knock that out in that regard if we wouldn't find that. Okay, and that's what Elsa calls support from the side. Support from the side. So you take your alternative explanation, you think about what else would have to be true if that alternative explanation would be true, and then you kind of check that box. You see, is that true or not, right? So you're kind of actually 2 steps away from your actual explanation. Your actual explanation is here, then your alternative explanation, and then you kind of think about what else would have to be true if your alternative explanation would be there. Okay, so that's support from the side, but then he says, last point, you can strengthen the proposed hypothesis by showing that it has additional testable implications, preferable of novel facts that are in fact observed. So what else would have to be true if our main explanation is actually there, and that's what Elsa calls support from below. So support from the side is about the alternative explanation. Support from below is supporting our main explanation that we have. So if we do have higher ticket prices, that lead indeed to more standing ovations, I mentioned it earlier already, then you would have, you should be able to observe these other things as well. you should be able to observe that shows with no increases in ticket prices, that there are fewer standing ovations, if that mechanism is actually what's going on, right, that I kind of outlined before. Or when companies give out tickets for free, again, you would find fewer explanations of that. So if you do actually find these kind of things, you find evidence for that, that kind of also provides support from below for our main explanation. So, and then our main explanation is basically the last explanation standing that we have, and that's sort of how we support our explanations. So we rule out, think of the alternatives, and then try to think about ruling out the alternatives, and also think about what else would have to be true. If your main explanation is there, always think about testable hypothesis, right? Something that you can actually refute, possibly falsifiability, Popper, show this is there or it's not there. And lastly, Elsa talks about support from above. So we have support from the side, support the alternative explanations, support from below, without your main explanation, kind of showing, I don't know, what else would have to be true if your main explanation is true. And support from above is now something else, and that's sort of what he calls, is like a theoretical argument that you can have. And in this case, is there something more general that we observe? Is there something out there that makes sense? We observe it as well. And in this case, there's this theory of cognitive dissonance reduction. And the argument goes that, I don't know, the humans, we kind of have internal dissonance, things that kind of are at odds with each other in our mind, something that we are in conflict with. And there the argument goes, the psychologist developed that, Leon Festinger, that we try to reduce that dissonance. We try to reduce that conflict that we are with, right? And we do that by kind of mental readjustments. That's a well-established theory of cognitive dissonance reduction. So the higher ticket prices would lead to more standing ovations because that's sort of like the mental adjustment process. Yeah, the show is great. I spend a lot of money on it, so I stand up. So, and you could apply cognitive dissonance in all sorts of contexts. Like for example, you come to UCD, you spend a lot of money for your university, you tell yourself you get the best possible education that you could have got, right? Because you have to make this mental readjustment to make sense of what's going on. Some other examples are, I don't know, you know that smoking is bad, and you smoke. You see, that's sort of like a conflict. Let's say I smoke and I know smoking is bad, but I smoke, I like it, but smoking is bad. That's like the internal conflict. But then I kind of resolve it in a way by telling myself, oh, well, actually, maybe smoking is not that bad. So one of the two things I change, right? A mental readjustment. It doesn't mean I have to meet in the middle. I can kind of maybe go into the one or the other, but it's a mental adjustment. Or another one would be you believe that lying is bad, but you're being forced to lie. And what we observe, that people then actually start believing in the lie, even though they know it's a lie. They kind of start believing in it to kind of make sense of things. Yeah? And I don't know, look at history. Look at the Holocaust, for example. How people kind of try to make sense of certain things. There's like a big conflict. They're sending people to death in a way, but they kind of are forced to do it in a way. So they kind of readjust it. They kind of tell themselves either they didn't see it, or either, I don't know, they were just like a little piece in the puzzle or whatnot. But you see, there's a mental readjustment process going on to resolve that inner conflict that people are exposed to. And that's sort of basically the strategy of how we kind of make explanations from Elster. The hypothetical deduktivo model, look into it. We have like support from the side. We have current explanation support from below. The main explanation support from above. That's like a theoretical argument. And that's about how Elster suggests how we make an explanation. I think it's quite interesting. It's different how you might have thought how we make an explanation. It's really think about alternatives and then think about what else would have to be true if these alternatives are there, and then try to see if you can test that or not. Okay, I changed the readings a little bit. I'm sorry for that, but I'm changing things as I go along sometimes. So the reading for Tuesday is the one by Bickel. That's the reading that we have on Thursday. Okay, see you then. Find it on Brightspace.